So, welcome back, Mark Session again, and let me check how the basic editing is working. So, uh, in my indicator, the sphere 3D is shown, so I can drag out the sphere 3D, and because I want to edit it instantly, I will not create more spheres. Instead, Control N, create only one, and hit T to enter edit mode. Now, if I want to make it fit, I can press F. That will zoom in the model. The hotkey is F, and if you want to use the button, you can use the frame here. If you want to move around the model, you just have to go in here, hold down the pen, and move it around, or you can use the right mouse button or button of the pen and start scrolling around. Let me turn on Shift F. Shift F is the polygon frame of the model, so it's a little bit easier to follow the way I can rotate around. So I'm holding down the button of my pen, and the pen is not touching the tablet. Okay, so we are hovering above the tablet. And if you're holding down Alt key and using the same button on the pen, that's pan. Technically a move. And if you're holding down Control and the button, that is zoom, and again F is to zoom in. Shift F is turning on the polyframe or turning it off. It's quite useful, especially when you start modeling. Now, as you see, our palette has a couple 3D elements now, so it's prepared for working with 3D. We have a standard sculpting brush that's pretty handsome, but if I start to make a stroke, I will receive an error message. Now, at least at the beginning, until you get used to this, please pay attention and read the messages. There's a reason. So right now, it tells me that it is just a 3D primitive, and I have to convert it into a kind of a polymesh, kind of an editable mesh that I can work with. Now, before we are actually making this change, let me check into tool that what we have an initialize section, because initialize is quite a useful area to tune your model according to your needs before you are actually converting it into something. Now, if you take a look at here at the quick pick, we have plenty of 3D primitives, and many of them could be used with slight modifications. Okay, so if you want to spend some time practicing with the fundamentals with ZBrush, it's quite a good thing to open these up and go into edit mode and look what Initialize can do with them. Okay, now I will check this divide value. Divide value is kind of a resolution adjustment. So as you see, there's some updates. Now it's quite a low resolution, so just let me crank it back, and I will a little bit lower. Okay, that's fine. Sometimes you have to be a little bit careful with the sliders within ZBrush, so it takes some time to get used to. Now, once Initialize section is ready, and oh, it's a nice model, then I can make it and convert it into a polymesh 3D. So hitting polymesh, and right now it will update. So when you switch this model, this 3D primitive, into a polymesh, and your polyframe is turned on, it will change color. This color is kind of an ID color, and whenever you convert something or change a polygon group, it will randomly change. So the color is randomly assigned. You have no influence on the color, but this acts like a code within ZBrush. Now, if you don't like it, you can turn off the Shift F polyframe, so it's not indicated, or if you take a look at the polyframe button, it's actually a combination of 3 buttons. So there are 2 sub-functions. First is the fill. So if you click on the fill, the color will disappear. If you click on the line, the wireframe will disappear. So you just have the color information. So you can use it this way. Usually everything is turned on, and hotkey is Shift F again. And don't forget, if you're holding down Control, the help, this kind of a hint will pop up, and it's a great help to understand how things are working within ZBrush. Okay, so right now this is a polymesh 3D model. So what does that mean? It is not a 3D primitive anymore. So if you take a look at the Initialize section, this one's completely updated and changed. And good news, we have a different set of tools available now, because it is an editable 3D model. So don't be surprised when you start from a simple 3D object. You have limited tools available, and your Initialize will look different. And once you convert them, then these will appear. Now, okay, so we already know the navigation. We already know that we have this polygon frame, and right now it's an editable object. It is time to sculpt, so let me make a stroke. Now, alright, it's quite funny. This is the standard tool. I'm using the dots, so it's kind of a stroke that's a line of these overlapping patterns, and it looks quite funny, but it's not enough for us. So we have to go forward. Now, if you take a look at the top row here, it's a top shelf, we have a kind of an elongated set of buttons, and if I hover over, it says under history, and it also tells the date and the number of the actual step. So you can walk back and forth if you have to make a decision, or you're looking for something that you want to modify earlier, then you can walk back in the history. Now, this one is not a canvas anymore. It is a really living 3D object. So if you want to save this, you have 2 main options. Of course, you can save as a ZBrush document, but document, again, it is just a canvas, so there's no actual 3D information that you preserve if you save it as a document, only just 2.5D information. So if you just Control and S, hitting Control and S, it will save a ZBrush project, and ZBrush project will save the complete environment, and you can load it back on, or you can save it as a simple tool without saving the environment. This one is smaller, faster, and it has many benefits, but it cannot store your history, for example. So if you want to save out the history, because you might want to make a movie about your evolution, about how the model evolves, then you have to have a history. Okay, so most of the times beginners is the best if you save it as a ZBrush project, especially if you don't have too many models. But once you have way much models, it's quite hard, and it could be quite a big file to save. Okay, now these are the basic saving settings. Now, what happens if I want to adjust this model a little bit more? What happens if I want to add more details? Now, every polymesh model could be subdivided. Let me Shift F, show the wireframe. If you press Ctrl D, once you have a polymesh 3D model, it will be subdivided and divided. Each polygon will be divided into 4. That means the polygons are smaller, so when you have a brush, the details will be much more accurate. And you can create plenty of subdivisions, but be careful, the number is always exponentially growing. So right now my active points are 15,000. If I'm pressing Ctrl D again, 63,000. If I'm pressing Ctrl D again, and now I have even more details, but it is almost 250,000. So it's quite easy to crank up details. Now what's the purpose of the details? Just let me show it in a basic way, because it's quite important to understand why we have these resolution levels. Right now we are at the highest level of resolution. If you want to check your level, you can always go in the geometry, and within the geometry the top row instantly will tell you the subdivisions. Now the number of subdivision, I have 4 levels of subdivision. I can drag it down. This is the lowest, the initial level, 3,800. So I can crank it up by pressing D. I can walk up. Okay, I'm pressing D, not Control D. Control D will create a new subdivision level. What happens if I press Control D now? It will tell me I can create the highest a higher subdivision level while I'm on the highest. So I have to walk up by pressing D, and then I can, if I press Ctrl D again, now it will create another subdivision level, and I'm already at the million range. If you want to walk back, Shift D to walk back, and D to walk up. Okay, now let me switch to a different alpha. It's quite easy to understand how this brush is working. It just creates a nice stroke. It looks like a worm. But if I'm switching to a different alpha, for example, let me switch to this kind of alpha, and let me change my brush size. I want to make a bigger brush. So using the navigations, okay, I want to look for a new surface, and how to change the brush size. If you press the space bar, it will pop up a kind of a multi-selector. You can select model, you can select sculpting brush, alpha, stroke type, everything like that, and there is draw size at the top. So I will increase the draw size and start using this pattern to create my stroke. Now this is quite an interesting thing. The actual level I'm using is not even my highest level. Now what happens if I walk up or I walk down? Take a look at first if I walk down. So I'm pressing Shift D to walk down on the lower level. Okay, at my lowest level the details are almost disappearing. So what I have to do, if I want to modify my model heavily, I walk down. If I want to add details, I walk up. This is quite a good idea to have if you are working with ZBrush. Now the other thing, the other reason why you need higher and higher details is because ZBrush painting features using the numbers, using the polygons actually. Just let me explain that. So I walk up, pressing the D, and walk up to the highest level, and instead of using this Z add will add volume to the model. I will turn this off, and I will switch RGB and switch to a different color, or actually let me load a texture. Now this texture is quite good. Okay, so this will be fine. It's not working properly. I have to turn off the lazy mouse feature, and the lazy mouse is you can turn it off by pressing L, and lazy mouse is actually this little tiny stroke. So if you see that tiny vector that appears at the beginning of your stroke, that is the lazy mouse. Now lazy mouse delays the build-up of the brush. So what does that mean? Your brush will react a little bit slower. It has a benefit. So lazy mouse is not a foolish idea, but when you want to paint, there's a chance you might want to turn it off. So L is the hotkey to turn it off, or you can go up here at stroke, and here's the lazy mouse, and lazy mouse is available from this area, so you can find it here. Now I've turned this off, and I can start painting with this color. Now what happens if I'm walking down on a resolution? If I'm pressing Shift D first, oh, nothing really changes. If I'm pressing Shift D again, now it becomes a little bit pixelated. So let me go back one level. You can see how the edge is changing. Shift D and Shift D lower and Shift D O. Now as you see, ZBrush is using these pixels, and these pixels are attached. Actually, each polygon has a corner, and that corner can contain the color information as well, not just the 3D information. So ZBrush is built upon this fact. And if you have a way low resolution model, your paint will be quite low resolution as well. Alright, we will move on with different structures, but this is technically the resolution theory, and the reason you have to have high resolution is to add quite detailed surface structures or quite detailed paintings. But in the early stage of modeling, the early stage of sculpting, you actually are looking for the opposite. You're looking for the lowest resolution as you can use. But because if you use a higher resolution, your modeling will suffer. So you have to keep in mind that the lower the resolution, the shape will be much more accurate, usually. And the higher the resolution, the details will be much more accurate. So thank you. See you next time.